I was checking a couple into room 614 while my two sons slept one floor above the lobby because my sister had refused to let us inside her house. 6 hours earlier, she had held up the financial records my husband sent the family and said, "You did this to yourself." What I didn't know yet was why he had sent those papers before I ever asked anyone for help. I'm Denise Walker. I was 29 years old, a hotel front desk receptionist, and the woman they called irresponsible had spent years keeping every household bill on schedule. I didn't cry. I didn't call my sister back. Days later, the lender sent me a document carrying my signature and a notarized time. The signature nearly convinced me. The time did not. 3 months later, a judge read that same time aloud, and my husband finally looked at me. Before I tell you what happened when he did, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is on your clock right now. The night had started with a blue suitcase scraping across my sister's concrete step. My older boy held the handle. My younger one hugged his backpack to his chest, still wearing the red sweatshirt he had slept in the night before. The porch light made every crease in those statements look sharp. My sister did not ask whether we were safe. She tapped one page with her fingernail and said my husband had warned them I was spending money, hiding bills, and blaming him whenever anyone asked questions. I'm not bringing that chaos into my house. The door caught the toe of my younger son's shoe before he moved it. I put both suitcases back in the trunk. At the hotel, the night manager found an employee room for us. A coworker who had already clocked out sat with the boys while I finished my shift. I checked names, handed over key cards, and told strangers breakfast started at 6:30. One floor above me, my children slept in a room we did not own. He had reached my family before I knew I needed them. By morning, I needed to know how much farther he had reached. By morning, the room smelled like burnt coffee, laundry soap, and the lemon cleaner housekeeping used in the hall. My older son folded his brother's sweatshirt over a chair. The younger one stood at the window counting delivery trucks turning into the parking lot. I made 3 calls before 8. The first was to my manager. I asked whether the employee emergency stay could be extended and whether I could move from evening shifts to days. She opened the staffing calendar, circled 2 names, and told me she could cover the next week if I submitted the request before noon. The second call was to the school. I put both boys into the before and after program, listed the hotel as our temporary address, and wrote down the pickup rules twice. The third call was to my bank. I opened an account in my name only, moved my direct deposit, changed every password I could remember, and set alerts for transfers over $50. At 9:12, I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I printed the confirmation pages and placed them in a manila envelope. Then I requested my full credit reports. While the pages loaded, I folded my uniform over the chair and checked the room number on the sleeve holding our key cards. My hands kept doing small things because small things still followed rules. The hem matched the hanger. The key opened the right door. The boys had cereal cups, clean socks, and somewhere to go after school. The reports were 47 pages together. I started with the accounts I recognized. Our mortgage, 1 joint grocery card, the car loan. Then came 2 credit cards from banks I had never used. Both opened with an email address that was not mine. One listed a phone number, ending in the same 4 digits as my husband's. I wrote down the date. I called each company and said, "I did not open this account." Both representatives asked whether I was certain. Both asked whether someone in my household might have applied with my permission. I answered, wrote down their names, requested the applications, and filed identity theft reports before lunch. At 1:43, I applied for a small apartment near the boys' school. The hotel room could not become our plan. The leasing office called 20 minutes later. The woman's voice softened after she confirmed my date of birth. She said my application had been declined because my debt-to-income ratio included a second mortgage. I asked her to repeat it. She called it a home equity loan secured by the house my husband and I owned. The balance was larger than the 2 false credit cards combined. According to the report, It had been open almost 5 months. I had never seen it. I found the line buried beneath our original mortgage. There was a lender, a partial account number, an opening date, and a payment already marked late. The house was not just where my husband still slept. It was collateral. I called the lender from the desk beside the window. The representative would not discuss the full file until I verified my identity and submitted a written fraud claim. She could tell me the application carried my name as a co-borrower, and that the closing papers included a notarized signature. For a moment, I looked at my hand resting beside the phone. Then I asked for every page. I requested the application, the note, the security instrument, the identification record, the notarial certificate, and the disbursement history. The woman paused after the last item and asked whether I had legal counsel. Not yet. That afternoon, the hotel's employee assistance program gave me the number of a family law attorney who offered an initial consultation. I booked the earliest appointment and started a second envelope. Credit reports in the first. School forms. Shift changes. Bank confirmations. And fraud reports in the second. Before my next shift, I submitted a written request to preserve the lobby camera footage from the date printed beside the signature. I did not tell security what I thought it proved. I gave them the date, the time range, and my employee number. The supervisor stamped my copy received. Back upstairs, my younger son pulled the wooden family frame from the suitcase. One hook on the back was bent. He asked where we should hang it. "We can't put nails in this wall," I said. He nodded and placed it face down in the top drawer. That night, I spread the reports across the desk. I had stopped new accounts from opening. I had separated my paycheck. The children had a schedule. Every call had a name and a time beside it. But the largest debt already had my name, my house, and a notarized signature. By noon, I had stopped him from borrowing one more dollar. Now I had to find out what he had already bought with the rest. What he had bought with the rest was not visible on the credit report. The report only showed where the damage had landed. I spread the pages across the small desk beneath the hotel window and divided them into 3 piles. The first held the debts I recognized our original mortgage. The car loan. The grocery card I used every Friday after work. The second held the 2 credit cards I had never opened. The third was one sheet by itself. The home equity loan. The boys were at school. Housekeeping carts rolled past the door, their wheels bumping over the seam in the carpet, each time one stopped outside. I gathered the papers into a stack until the cart moved on. Then I opened them again. The first credit card company emailed its fraud packet that afternoon. The application used my full legal name, my social security number, and an email address made from my first initial and married last name. It looked close enough to pass if no one asked me to spell it. It was not mine. The verification phone number belonged to my husband. I called the fraud department and gave the representative the case number from my identity theft report. She asked whether I might have forgotten applying during a promotional offer. I looked at the paper calendar beside the phone. The account had been opened on a Tuesday when I had worked a double shift and picked up both boys from after-school care. "I'm certain," I said. She asked whether my husband had permission to use my information. No. She asked whether I wanted to add him as an authorized contact while the claim was reviewed. No. I wrote down her name, the time, and the confirmation number. Then I called the second company and answered the same questions again. "Are you sure? Could someone in your household have done this with your consent? Is it possible you benefited from the account?" By the 4th time, I stopped explaining. I gave dates. I gave numbers. I requested copies. The second application showed the same false email address and a different mailing address. A post office box I had never rented. The signature curved the way mine did at the beginning of my last name. Whoever copied it had practiced the first half and rushed the rest. That was not proof. Not yet. The home equity lender sent its packet by overnight mail 2 days later. The envelope was thick enough to make a hard sound when the front desk clerk placed it beside my name badge. I carried it upstairs unopened, put the boys' dinner in the microwave, and waited until they were brushing their teeth before I cut the tape. The application listed both my husband and me as borrowers. It included our property address, estimated income, mortgage balance, and a request to deposit the proceeds into an account I did not recognize. The closing package held a promissory note, a security document tied to the house, and a notarial certificate stating that I had appeared in person and acknowledged my signature. The signature looked better than the ones on the credit card forms. I turned the page sideways. I held it near the lamp. I traced the pressure marks with one finger without touching the ink. It still was not mine. The notarization gave a date, a location, and a time in the early evening. I copied all three onto a yellow legal pad. Then I pulled up the schedule app on my phone. I had been at the hotel that night. My next step was not to call my husband. It was to call payroll. Before they could release anything, the payroll coordinator asked for a written request. I sent one from the hotel office and asked for my time card, punch history, and any correction records for that date. Then I requested the point of sale activity associated with my employee login and the front desk transaction report. While I waited, I met the attorney through the hotel's employee assistance program. Her office was above a pharmacy in a brick building near the courthouse. The waiting room smelled like printer toner and winter coats. She did not carry a magic folder. She carried a lined pad, asked what I could afford each month, and told me what would take time. She explained that the credit card disputes and the divorce case would move on separate tracks. The card companies would investigate whether I had authorized the accounts. The lender would examine the loan documents. The family court could decide how disputed debt, the house, custody, support, and attorney fees should be handled between my husband and me. A separate investigation could follow if the records showed forgery or identity theft. Nothing disappears because one judge believes you, she said. I liked that she said it before taking my case. We made a payment plan. I signed a limited retainer for the immediate filings and agreed to provide every document in date order. She gave me a checklist: credit reports, full account applications, fraud reports, bank statements, tax returns, mortgage records, school schedules, work schedules, and every communication my husband had sent about my finances. I left with no promise of victory. I left with tasks. At the hotel, I bought 3 expanding folders from the gift shop because the office supply store had already closed. One was labeled Real Accounts. One was labeled Accounts I Did Not Open. The last was labeled House. The house folder filled fastest. The lender's records showed the loan had been approved for more than both false credit card limits combined. The payment had already gone late. If the lender treated the obligation as valid, the default could move beyond my credit score and attach itself to the place where my children had left their beds, their books, and the pencil marks my husband and I had made on the kitchen doorway as they grew. I requested the full disbursement file. I requested the identification documents used at closing. I requested the notary's journal entry. I requested the recording information for the security instrument. Then I sent my attorney copies of everything and placed the originals in the hotel safe deposit room under my employee number. Each request created another deadline. Each answer opened another question. By the end of that week, I knew the size of what had been built around me. This was not one hidden purchase or one bill my husband had failed to mention. Someone had used my name across multiple accounts, copied my signature, connected the largest debt to our house, and created a paper trail designed to survive the moment I said it was false. The credit cards could ruin my score. The loan could take my children's home. And the only part of the loan package that claimed I had appeared in person came with a time I could test. The time on the notarial certificate was 6:42 in the evening. Payroll sent my records the next morning. I opened the email at the front desk before sunrise. While the lobby lights still reflected in the glass doors and the coffee machine clicked as it heated, my time card showed that I had clocked in at 2:57 that afternoon and clocked out at 11:14 that night. That helped. It did not prove enough. A time card could show I was scheduled. It could not show that I had never stepped outside. I could have left during a break, driven across town, signed the papers, and returned before anyone noticed. My husband's attorney could say exactly that. And a clean row of numbers on a payroll report would not stop him. So I asked for the rest. The front office manager printed the transaction log tied to my employee code. At 6:28, I issued 2 replacement key cards for room 312. At 6:35, I checked in a family from Ohio. At 6:41, I posted a cash deposit for a guest who had locked his wallet in his car. At 6:44, I reactivated a key for room 508. At 6:52, I recorded a noise complaint from the 3rd floor. The certificate said I was standing before a notary somewhere else at 6:42. I wrote down the time. Then I placed the transaction log beside the closing document. The pages did not argue. They simply refused to agree. My manager signed a statement confirming that each transaction required my personal employee login and that sharing login credentials violated hotel policy. Payroll certified the time card. Security confirmed in writing that my preservation request had been received before the footage was scheduled for routine deletion. The footage still existed. I was not allowed to copy it myself. The security supervisor viewed the relevant section with the hotel's counsel and wrote a preservation memo identifying the camera, date, and time range. He told me the video showed the front desk continuously during the period I had requested. Does it show me? I asked. It shows who was working the desk. I did not ask him to say more in the hallway. My attorney sent a formal request for the preserved footage, the authenticated transaction records, and any system logs showing whether my employee session had been interrupted. She also requested the notary's journal and the identification record used during the signing. That changed the question. I was no longer asking a creditor to believe that the signature was not mine. I was asking who had created the document, what identification had been shown, and where the money had gone after the paper was signed. The first question was defensive. The second was not. That evening, I returned to the employee room and found my older son doing math homework at the desk where I had sorted the loan papers. He had pushed the folders into a neat stack and placed my yellow legal pad on top. The younger one was asleep, with one sock still on. I checked the lock. I set the alarm on my phone. Then I opened the notarial certificate again and looked at the line beneath the signature. The ink had not changed. The time had not changed. But the page no longer looked like proof against me. It looked like a mistake someone had believed would never be measured. The time card showed I was scheduled. The transaction log placed my hands at the desk. The preserved camera might close the remaining space between those two facts. But until the footage was authenticated and the notary answered for the journal entry, I had only found the crack. I had not broken the wall. A false signature can be argued over. A clock has less patience. A clock has less patience. But people can wait a long time before admitting they chose the easier lie. 3 days after my attorney requested the original emails my husband had sent my family, my sister called the hotel. I was at the front desk matching a guest's name to a reservation when her number appeared on the screen. I let it ring twice, finished printing the key sleeve, and answered after the guest walked toward the elevators. She said she had received a letter from my attorney. I didn't know this was going to court. Behind her voice, I could hear a cabinet door close and the low hum of her dishwasher. Ordinary sounds. The kind that belonged to a house where no child had slept with a suitcase beside the bed. My attorney had not threatened her. The letter asked her to preserve the messages, attachments, and delivery information exactly as she had received them. It also told her not to forward screenshots if the original email was still available. My sister said, "I thought you already had the statements." "I had what you held on the porch." There was a pause. Then she said she would send everything. The original email arrived that evening. Its subject line was, "Family please read before helping denies." My husband had sent it to my sister, my parents, and 2 relatives who had helped us before. The The timestamp was 4 days before I found the messages between him and the woman he was seeing. 4 days before I packed the boys' clothes. 4 days before I asked anyone for a place to stay. I read the email once. Then I printed it and read it again with a ruler under each line. He wrote that I had been spending secretly, missing payments, and becoming unpredictable whenever he questioned me. He warned them that I might accuse him of controlling the money. He said I could ask for a loan, a co-seigneur, or temporary housing, and that helping me would only enable the pattern. Near the bottom, he added one sentence about the children. He said moving them out of the house would prove I was unstable. The attachments were labeled bank records, overdue accounts, and Denise's private card. They looked like statements because he had cut off the headers, renamed the files, and arranged selected transactions beneath my name. One page mixed charges from a joint household account with balances from cards I had never opened. Another omitted the phone number and email used on the application. He had not shown my family the records. He had shown them a version. I wrote down the time the email had been sent. Then I checked my calendar. That evening, I had worked until 11 and brought home takeout because he said he was tired. He had eaten at the kitchen counter while I packed lunches for the next morning. My sister called again, after she opened the attachments beside the full account applications my attorney had sent her. She said, "They didn't look like this before. They looked exactly the way he needed them to." She started explaining what she had believed. She said he sounded calm. She said the papers looked official. She said our mother had reminded everyone that I had always tried to handle too much at once. I slid the hotel incident log into its binder while she spoke. The rings clicked shut one by one. Then she said, "If I had known there were lawyers involved." I stopped writing. Not if she had known I was telling the truth. Not if she had known the boys needed a bed. If she had known there would be a record of what she did. She offered to tell my attorney that my husband had contacted them first. She asked whether giving a statement would help. I told her my attorney would send instructions. She did not ask when she could see the boys. The email answered the question that had followed me since the porch. My husband had not called my family because I left. He had called them, so leaving would cost me every safe place I might reach. The next morning, my attorney added the email to the divorce file. She marked the timestamp, the recipient list, and the sentence about housing. Then she showed me the papers my husband's attorney had filed the night before. He was using the hotel exactly as he had promised. He did not wait for me to leave. He made sure leaving would look like proof against me. The version of me he filed with the court began with the hotel address. His motion described it as transient lodging. It said I had removed the children from their established home without a stable plan, restricted his access, and exposed them to an unsuitable living arrangement. He asked the court to order the house sold, divide the home equity loan as marital debt, and give him primary custody until I obtained permanent housing. My attorney handed me a pencil. Mark every sentence we can answer with a document. I did not write in the margins. I placed a small check beside each claim and opened the folders I had built upstairs from the lobby. Transient lodging. I pulled the employee emergency stay agreement, the extension approvals, and the receipts showing the room had been authorized through the hotel's assistance program. No stable plan. I added the boys' school attendance, their before and after care enrollment, the signed pickup list, and the calendar showing the shift change my manager approved. Unsuitable supervision. I placed the coworker's statement from the first night beside the childcare records that began the next morning. I added my work schedule and the hotel policy confirming children could not remain alone in employee rooms. Restricted access. I printed the messages where I had offered scheduled calls and asked him to communicate through email while the fraud reports were pending. His replies did not ask about homework, medication, or school. They asked when I was coming home. The stack grew without raising its voice. At the temporary custody hearing, my husband wore the navy suit he used for funerals and job interviews. He sat with both hands around a paper cup while his attorney described me as overwhelmed, impulsive, and financially reckless. I watched the court reporter's fingers move, When my attorney responded, she did not call me strong. She did not say I was a good mother. She gave the judge dates. She showed that the children had missed no school. She showed who supervised them, where I worked, when I changed shifts, and how quickly I froze the accounts. She showed that the hotel had provided a legal, documented emergency arrangement while I searched for housing. Then she placed my husband's email to the family beside his motion. The same week, he warned my relatives not to house me. He asked the court to punish me for using the only housing left. His attorney objected to the interpretation. The judge allowed the documents and said motive could be addressed later. Later was enough. During his sworn testimony, my husband said the home equity loan was not secret. He said we had discussed borrowing the money for repairs to the house and that I had signed the closing papers willingly. My attorney asked which repairs. He looked toward his lawyer before answering. Then he said the roof, plumbing, and kitchen needed work. She asked for the contractor's name. He said there had been several estimates. She asked whether any contract had been signed. He said I handled most household paperwork. That answer landed softly. It was almost clever. My attorney placed the loan date in front of him and asked where the signing occurred. He named the office listed on the notarial certificate. She asked whether he had been present. He said yes. Then she asked whether I had signed before or after him. After, he said. She asked what time. He said he did not remember the exact minute, but it was after work. The court reporter kept typing. My attorney did not show the camera. She did not show the transaction log. She asked him to confirm that the loan was for household repairs, that I signed in person, and that both of us benefited from the proceeds. He confirmed all three. The story was now under oath. Through discovery, my attorney requested the original notary journal, the identification records used at closing, the complete disbursement file, the receiving account information, and every invoice my husband claimed was connected to repairs. His attorney agreed to produce what existed and reserved objections to the rest. Outside the courtroom, my sister waited near the vending machines. She had submitted her statement that morning. She told me our mother wanted to apologize and asked whether the boys could come for dinner that weekend. I buttoned my coat. The court hasn't even decided where they'll live. She looked down at the tile. The apology had arrived after the exhibit number. That afternoon, the judge left the temporary custody arrangement with me. The order noted the children's school attendance, documented supervision, and consistent routine. It did not decide the house or the loan. Those questions would wait for the financial records. Back at the hotel, I filed the temporary order behind the school forms. Then I placed my husband's sworn testimony in the house folder and underlined 3 phrases: repairs. Signed in person. Both benefited. He had finally stopped changing the story. He called the hotel proof that I was unstable. I filed the records showing it was where I kept our children stable. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was packing cereal cups into the boys' school bags. The card company had completed its investigation. The account was confirmed as fraudulent. The balance would be removed. Collection activity would stop. And the company would notify the credit bureaus that the debt did not belong to me. I read the letter twice before setting it beside the toaster. The second company called that afternoon. Their investigator had compared the application email, verification number, mailing address, and my identity theft report. They reached the same conclusion. The account would be closed. The late payments would be corrected. A written confirmation was already in the mail. For the first time in weeks, I opened my credit report without holding my breath. One account showed disputed removal pending. The other carried a note that the creditor had accepted my fraud claim. The total debt under my name had dropped by thousands of dollars. I printed both notices. Then I took the boys for hamburgers at the diner across from the hotel. My older son asked whether the letters meant we could go home. The younger one wanted to know if his room still had the glow-in-the-dark stars over the closet. I folded the notices and placed them beside my plate. Not yet. They went back to their fries. The credit cards had damaged my name. but they had never held the deed to the house. The home equity lender did. My attorney called the next morning. The lender had reviewed my fraud claim and refused to remove the loan through its expedited process. Their file contained my personal information, a signature resembling mine, a notarized acknowledgement, and a recorded security instrument attached to real property I co-owned. A credit card could be frozen while an application was investigated. A house could not be treated like an envelope someone had mailed to the wrong address. The lender wanted authenticated evidence, sworn testimony, and a determination about the signing. Until then, the loan remained in default. Fees continued to accumulate, and the lien stayed attached to the house. That same week, my husband amended his request to the court. He argued that the property should be sold before the debt grew larger. He asked the judge to divide the remaining equity after the home equity loan was paid. In 3 pages, he turned the obligation he had hidden into a reason I should lose the house quickly. I read the filing at the front desk after the lobby emptied. He had created the fire. Now he was asking the court to sell what was burning. My attorney told me not to answer with a phone call, a message, or a paragraph about fairness. She sent the lender's refusal, the fraud findings from both card companies, the preserved hotel records, and the discovery requests into one indexed file. Then she showed me what had finally arrived from the notary. The journal entry listed my name, the loan document, the same evening, and the same time, 6:42. The identification column did not contain a driver's license number. It contained a short notation that looked like an employee identification entry, followed by initials. The notary claimed she did not remember the signing. She also claimed her journal was accurate. Both statements could not carry the same weight. The disbursement records had arrived too, but my attorney kept them sealed in a separate folder until the bank produced the receiving account certification. A transfer line without proof of account ownership would give my husband room to argue that the money had gone somewhere for our benefit. We needed the entire chain. Before I tell you what the court saw, think about this. If a document carries your name, a signature that resembles yours, a notary's seal, and a lien against a real house, what would you need to prove that none of it should have existed? My younger son asked again that night when we could leave the hotel. He was sitting on the carpet with the wooden frame in his lap, pressing the bent hook flat with his thumb. Are we staying until they believe you? I took the frame from him before the metal cut his skin and placed it back in the drawer. We're staying until the papers are finished. He nodded as if papers were a kind of weather. The credit cards had taken my name. The loan was waiting to take the house. The financial hearing began at 9 in the morning. 3 months after my sister closed her door. My family sat behind my attorney. My sister held a tissue in both hands. My mother kept looking at the floor. No one tried to touch me. Across the aisle, my husband arranged his papers into a straight stack. He wore the same navy suit and kept one finger pressed against the edge of the table as if holding his place in a book. The lender's custodian testified first. She identified the application, the loan note, the recorded security instrument, the notarial certificate, and the disbursement records. The document stated that I appeared in person at 6:42 in the evening and signed before the notary. My attorney did not begin with the signature. She began with the clock. Payroll certified that I clocked in at 2:57 and out at 11:14. The hotel's systems manager authenticated the front desk logs tied to my individual employee account. At 6:28, I issued replacement keys. At 6:35, I checked in a family. At 6:41, I posted a cash deposit. At 6:44, I reactivated a room key. At 6:52, I entered a noise complaint. Then the security supervisor authenticated the preserved footage. The screen faced the judge. At 6:38, I was behind the front desk folding a receipt into a key sleeve. At 6:41, I accepted cash from a man in a gray jacket. At 6:42, the time printed on the loan certificate. I was still there. At 6:44, I leaned across the counter and handed a key card to a woman holding a sleeping child. The camera did not blink. The notary had testified by deposition that the person before her presented identification and signed in her presence. But the journal did not contain a driver's license number, expiration date, or state. The unexplained notation in the identification column matched no hotel credential issued to me. The judge looked at my husband. You testified that your wife signed after work and that you were present. How could she appear before the notary at 6:42, while this recording shows her serving guests at the hotel? My husband answered before his attorney stood. She left during her break. The room went still. My attorney placed the transaction timeline on the screen. There was no break long enough to leave the hotel, drive to the notary's office, review and sign the closing documents, and return. The office was 26 minutes away in evening traffic. My system session never closed. My employee code recorded activity on both sides of the disputed minute. Then my attorney opened the transcript from his earlier testimony. He had not said I signed during a break. He had said I signed after work. His attorney asked for a moment to confer. The judge told him the witness had already answered. My husband looked down at his papers. For the first time, none of them gave him somewhere else to go. His attorney shifted to the argument they had prepared. Even if the signing process was defective, he said, the marriage had benefited from the loan. The money was used for repairs to marital property. Both spouses should therefore share the obligation. That was when my attorney opened the second folder. The lender's disbursement file showed that the proceeds never entered our joint account. No payment went to a roofer, plumber, contractor, hardware store, or building supplier. The entire amount moved into a checking account opened solely under my husband's control. The bank certification identified him as the only authorized owner. From there, the money split. One transfer paid off a personal loan he had never disclosed. Another covered hotel charges in a city where he had told me he was attending a work conference. Several payments went to a credit card linked to the woman whose messages I had found. There were restaurant bills, airline tickets, jewelry, and rent for an apartment I had never seen. No roof, no plumbing, no kitchen. My attorney placed his sworn testimony beside the bank records. Repairs, signed in person, both benefited. 3 statements, 3 failures. The judge asked whether my husband could produce a single contractor invoice connected to the loan. His attorney said they could not. Behind me, someone began crying. I did not turn around. The judge stated that the evidence raised serious findings of fraud, dissipation of marital assets, and false testimony. She said the notarized document could not be treated as reliable evidence of my consent when objective records placed me elsewhere and the identification procedure could not be explained. She did not erase the loan that morning. She did something more precise. She ruled that the debt would not be provisionally allocated to me, preserved my exclusive use of the house pending final distribution, ordered my husband to stop seeking its sale, and directed that the disputed signing and disbursement records be referred for further investigation. The custody arrangement remained with me. The family emails were admitted with the financial records. My husband's warning that I might invent financial abuse now sat beside proof that he had used my name, isolated me from help, and spent the proceeds alone. My sister lowered her face into the tissue. My mother whispered my name. They had heard me say it for years. They believed it when the judge did. I gathered my folders in the same order I had built them, real accounts. Accounts I did not open. House. My husband stayed seated while his attorney spoke quietly beside him. I didn't argue with their paper. I found the real paper. The judge's ruling gave me the house for the moment. The final order took longer. For 7 more weeks. I carried the same 3 folders between the hotel, my attorney's office, and the courthouse. Real accounts. Accounts I did not open. House. Their corners softened. The elastic bands stretched. Every new page had a date written in the upper right corner before I filed it. The lender completed its fraud review after receiving the authenticated hotel records, the notary journal, the court's findings, and the certified account information showing where the money had gone. They removed me from the disputed obligation and submitted corrections to the credit bureaus. The late payments disappeared from my reports one by one, not all on the same morning, but enough that I could watch my name become mine again. The family court did not pretend the debt had never existed. It assigned the obligation to my husband because he had controlled the transaction and received the proceeds. The judge charged the money he had taken against his share of the marital property and ordered him to reimburse a substantial portion of my legal fees. Child support came through wage withholding. There would be no more messages saying he would pay when I came home. I received primary custody. His parenting time followed a written schedule, with exchanges in a public location until the court reviewed the investigation and his compliance. He could not arrive at the house without notice. He could not remove the boys from school. He could not use the mortgage, the bank accounts, or the front door to decide when I was allowed to feel safe. The forged loan application, the notary records, the false identification entry, and the disbursement trail were forwarded to the agencies responsible for investigating them. My attorney warned me that investigations moved slowly and did not promise an arrest, a charge, or a courtroom ending tied with a ribbon. I did not need her to promise one. The record existed. The final property order allowed me to keep the house. My husband's interest was reduced by the money he had taken, the fees he owed, and the debt assigned to him. I refinanced the legitimate mortgage in my name after the fraudulent lien was cleared. The closing officer placed a stack of documents in front of me and turned each signature line toward the light. This time, I signed every page myself. I wrote down the time. The boys and I returned on a Saturday morning in early spring. The lawn had grown uneven along the fence. A delivery flyer was stuck beneath the porch mat, and one of the kitchen blinds hung crooked where a slat had broken. The house did not look rescued. It looked empty. I changed the locks before we carried in the first box. A locksmith drilled out the old cylinders while the boys sat on the front steps eating powdered donuts from a paper bag. When he handed me the new keys, I gave one to my older son and clipped the spare inside the kitchen cabinet. My husband no longer had one. We opened windows. We washed the sheets that had been left in the closets. I scrubbed the refrigerator shelves while my younger son peeled old glow-in-the-dark stars from a plastic bag and pressed them back above his closet. My older boy found the pencil marks on the kitchen doorway. He stood with his back against them and asked me to measure him again. I drew a new line. The school bus still stopped at the same corner. Their names remained on the same class lists. The before and after program stayed in place for the first month because I did not remove anything that made their days predictable simply because we had a house again. At night, I checked the locks once. Then I checked them again. My family began calling after the final order. My mother left a message saying she had been wrong. My father said he should have asked questions before believing papers sent by someone outside the family. My sister mailed the original porch statements to my attorney in a large envelope and included a handwritten note. She wrote that she could still hear the suitcase scrape across the concrete. A week later, the three of them came to the house. They did not arrive unannounced. My sister texted first, and I gave them a time. When the bell rang, I stood on the inside of the same kind of locked door I had stood outside months earlier. My mother held a casserole dish. My sister held nothing. She said she was sorry before I opened the door all the way. She said she had believed him because he sounded calm, because the documents looked official, and because letting us inside would have meant admitting something serious was happening. I looked at the porch behind her. There was enough room for 2 suitcases. I let them sit in the living room for 20 minutes. The boys were at school. No one was allowed to turn the visit into a reunion they had not earned. My father asked whether they could see the children that weekend. I said future visits would happen slowly, with me present, and only when the boys wanted them. My mother began to say they were family. I placed my hand on the new key in my pocket. So are we, I said. That's why I decide what comes through this door. No one argued. They left before the school bus arrived. I did not close the door to punish them. I closed it because an apology did not create access. Regret did not erase the night my youngest moved his shoe before my sister's door caught it. Their voices could soften. Their place in our lives would still be measured by what they did after the truth became inconvenient for them. The house grew quieter over the next few weeks. The boys left backpacks in the hallway again. Shoes collected beneath the bench. My older son complained about the bathroom light, and my younger one asked whether we could paint one wall blue. I said yes. He asked how long we were staying. I showed him the closing folder. He did not read it. He touched the embossed seal, then ran upstairs to choose a paint color. On the first Sunday, after we unpacked the last box, I opened the carton marked Bedroom Fragile. The wooden family frame lay beneath 2 towels, its glass unbroken, the hook on the back still bent. I carried it into the hallway. My younger son came behind me with a hammer from the kitchen drawer. He looked at the wall, then at the frame. I expected him to ask where it should go. He held out the hammer. Do we have to ask the landlord before we put a nail in? The deed was recorded. The fraudulent lien was gone. The locks had been changed. His room was painted blue. His stars were above the closet, and his name was written beside a new pencil mark in the kitchen. Still, he asked. I knelt beside him and turned the frame over. Together, we straightened the bent hook with a pair of pliers. I showed him the place on the wall and let him tap the nail in until it held. The frame hung slightly crooked. We left it that way. For anyone listening who has ever been made to produce receipts for a truth the people closest to you should have recognized, you are not alone. Sometimes survival begins quietly with a password changed, a time written down, or a door you finally control. Subscribe and stay with us for more stories about women who stopped arguing with the lie and found the proof that set their lives back in order. That night, I turned off the hallway light and saw the frame resting against the blue shadow of the wall. My younger son had left the hammer beneath it, as if he might need permission removed one nail at a time. The court gave me back my name, but my son still asks permission to make a home feel permanent.